AP News Summary at 4:35 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Israeli forces rescue 2 hostages in dramatic Gaza raid that killed at least 67 Palestinians. Rafah, Gaza Strip. AP. Israeli forces rescued 2 hostages after storming a heavily guarded apartment in a densely packed town in the Gaza Strip and extracting them under fire. Local officials say at least 67 Palestinians were killed in the operation early Monday, most of them in airstrikes. The rescue in Rafah briefly lifted the spirits of Israelis shaken by the plight of the dozens of hostages held by Hamas. Israel has described Rafah as the last remaining Hamas stronghold in the territory and signaled that it may soon target the town on the southern edge of Gaza. More than half of Gaza's population of 2.3 million have fled to Rafah to escape fighting. Elsewhere, Egypt is threatening to void its decades-old peace treaty with Israel. What does that mean? Jerusalem, AP. Egypt has threatened to void its decades-long peace treaty with Israel if it begins a large-scale offensive against Rafah, where some 1.4 million Palestinians are sheltering in densely packed tent camps on the border with Egypt. The landmark treaty took shape during the Camp David Accords, brokered by U.S. President Jimmy Carter. It was the first time an Arab country recognized Israel. If the treaty is nullified, it may have serious ramifications for Israel, which has relied since its signing on calm along its southern border. Boy critically injured in Texas megachurch shooting is son of suspect in attack, police say. Houston, AP. Authorities say the young boy, who was critically injured in a shooting at a Texas megachurch on Sunday, has been identified as the son of the shooter. Police identified the shooter as 36-year-old Janess Ivan Moreno, and say Moreno had a history of mental illness, including being placed under emergency detention in 2016. Investigators had not yet established the shooter's motive. Moreno used an AR-style rifle before being killed by off-duty officers working security at celebrity pastor Joel Osteen's Lakewood Church. Police say Moreno's son remained in critical condition on Monday with a gunshot wound to the head. The boy was initially described on Sunday as a 5-year-old. Trump appears at federal court in Florida for closed hearing in his classified documents case. Fort Pierce, Florida. AP. Former President Donald Trump has spent several hours at a federal courthouse in Florida for a closed hearing in his criminal case charging him with mishandling classified documents. Monday's hearing was scheduled to discuss the procedures for the handling of classified evidence in the case, which is currently set for trial on May 20. Trump faces dozens of felony counts accusing him of hoarding highly classified records at his Mar-a-Lago estate and obstructing FBI efforts to get them back. Trump asks Supreme Court to put off his election interference trial, claiming immunity. Washington, AP. Former President Donald Trump is asking the Supreme Court to extend the delay in his election interference trial and ultimately find him immune from prosecution on charges he plotted to overturn his 2020 election loss. His lawyers filed an emergency appeal with the court on Monday, just 4 days after the justices heard Trump's separate appeal to remain on the presidential ballot. The filing keeps on hold what would be a landmark criminal trial of a former president while the nation's highest court decides what to do. The Supreme Court's decision, and how quickly it acts, could determine whether Trump stands trial in the case before the November election. How Trump urging Russia to invade delinquent NATO members distorts how the alliance works. Warsaw, Poland, AP. Donald Trump says he once warned that he would allow Russia to do whatever it wants to NATO member nations that are delinquent in devoting 2% of their gross domestic product to defense. Trump's comment on Saturday represented the latest instance in which the former president and Republican frontrunner seem to side with an authoritarian state over America's democratic allies. NATO members don't pay to belong and don't owe the organization anything other than contributions to a largely administrative fund. Trump's frequent complaint has been how much NATO countries put into their own military budgets. The 2% is a voluntary benchmark and no debt or delinquency is involved. Biden welcomes Jordan's king as the framework for a hostage deal is decided in Israel-Hamas conflict. Washington, AP. President Joe Biden is hosting Jordan's King Abdullah II in Washington. The two leaders are expected to discuss the effort to free hostages in Gaza and growing concern over a possible Israeli military operation in the border city of Rafah. Monday's meeting is the first between the allies since 3 American troops were killed last month in a drone strike against a U.S. base in Jordan. Biden blamed Iran-backed militias for the fatalities, the first for the U.S. after months of strikes by such groups against American forces across the Middle East since the start of the Israel-Hamas war. On Super Bowl broadcast, He Gets Us ads featuring Jesus Stand Out for Change of Pace message. For the second year in a row, a religious Super Bowl ad campaign promised viewers that Jesus gets us. 2 commercials from Sunday night centered Jesus' message to love your neighbors, even across ideological divides. In one, people of different races, classes and gender expressions have their feet washed, including a woman outside a family planning clinic. Critics have noted the campaign's welcoming and progressive messages seem at odds with some of the campaign's Christian funders, who have also supported anti-LGBTQ+ and anti-abortion causes. The He Gets Us campaign is now under a new charitable organization, Come Near. It plans to advertise during the Paris Olympics, the NFL Draft, and the Republican and Democratic conventions. Post-Roe v. Wade, more patients rely on early prenatal testing as states toughen abortion laws. Washington, AP. Doctors in states with strict abortion restrictions say an increasing number of pregnant women are seeking early prenatal testing. They're hoping to detect serious problems while they still have time to choose whether to continue the pregnancy or have an abortion. But early ultrasounds show far less about the condition of a fetus than later ones. And genetic screenings may be inaccurate. Since Roe v. Wade, about half the states have put in abortion bans or restrictions. And that started the clock ticking. Many healthcare providers say more patients are deciding the fate of their pregnancies based on whatever information they can gather before state bans kick in. Oscar nominees for films from Oppenheimer and Barbie to documentary shorts gather for luncheon. Los Angeles, AP. The casts of Barbie and Oppenheimer are gathering Monday for the annual Academy Award nominees luncheon along with other Oscar hopefuls coming together for photos, hugs and congratulations. It's a relatively egalitarian event where, first-time, little-known nominees from categories like Best Animated Short get to rub shoulders as equals with famous nominees like Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone. The centerpiece of the luncheon is a group picture that the entire class of nominees takes together. This year's most nominated films include Oppenheimer, Barbie, The Holdovers and Killers of the Flower Moon.